Persistent heavy rainfall is continuing to expose the country's poor state of infrastructure. Over the past few weeks, some roads sunk in parts of Gauteng and had to be closed down over safety concerns. Blackouts, vandalism and protest action are also worsening the infrastructure crisis. Now, who should be held accountable for this, and how do we stop them from passing the buck? Gundo Maswime, who is civil engineering lecturer at the Department of Civil Engineering at UCT, joins us now for more on that conversation. He's also a member of the Urban and Public Infrastructure Research Unit. Gundo, good afternoon, and thank you for your time. So just your overall assessment, there's a big focus on infrastructure, right, with the function of driving infrastructure investment and specific targeted projects now situated and located in the presidency. So that speaks to the centrality of infrastructure in as far as the economy is concerned. But what's your assessment of the state of play in as far as socio-economic infrastructure is concerned?
Thank you, Rasiza. You are right to say that there is a focus on public infrastructure and the location of it within the presidency. And in fact, the infrastructure and the investment that Dr. Ramokgopa is looking after in the presidency, also as part of Infrastructure South Africa, that is going well, and it's also covered by a specific set of legislation that makes things much easier because all the approvals are done very fast. And so most of those projects that are called the presidential infrastructure projects are going well. But our challenge in infrastructure in South Africa is not so much on the national front, save maybe for the railway infrastructure. The challenge is in local government, is in the municipalities, the metros. In a few instances, it's with the provincial infrastructure, and that is what we are calling social infrastructure because it's what people use on a normal day within their localities. That is where we have the biggest problem.
Yeah. So what are the examples that you could give? I mean, just recently we were focusing on the Gauteng Freeway Improvement Project and the financing thereof, popularly known as the e-tolls project. But I think that conversation actually reveals one dimension, which is roads. But I don't imagine that the problems are confined to just roads.
Yes, there has been many challenges. In fact, many municipalities across the country are struggling to provide water at a level of service that is acceptable to the residents. And equally, many municipalities are unable to maintain their road infrastructure at a rate that is it's usable. In fact, in many instances, even the easiest activities such as grass cutting, which when it's done properly next to roads can extend the lifespan of the road. You find that there seems to be a lack of ability when you are looking at it from a distance to just get some of these things going. But when we zoom in, we actually realize that it's not only that there's probably a lack of skills and so on. After all, such things do not require very sophisticated skills. It is the framework or the template within which we have put our local government infrastructure provision. The legislative framework, especially when it pertains to public procurement. The process of getting things done is not straightforward, it's very complicated. It involves so many things and it becomes very unsafe for people who need to act to do things. You are much safer when you're not doing anything than when you're doing something.
So to what extent have weaknesses in quality as opposed to quantity of infrastructure been exposed by recent tragedies such as the floods in April in KwaZulu-Natal, but also as we get into the rainy season, especially in the Highveld, and you're starting to see disruptions of of services. Just recently, there was this announcement along the N14 in Gauteng around a sinkhole, which I imagine talks to various conditions beneath the surface, that probably predate the building of that infrastructure. But I'm just wondering, to what extent do tragedies such as those, such as the KwaZulu-Natal floods and the heavy rains that do come down around this time, expose quality issues in as far as social infrastructure is concerned?
Yes, yeah, thanks. So the KwaZulu-Natal issue is a special case in many ways because, yes, it was flood related, but most of the damage that was done by landslides is not something that with your normal stormwater design and planning could have been abated. Yes, it has been known since the 50s that there are some problematic slopes that are unstable and areas around in different parts of Durban, going also towards Pietermaritzburg, where the underlying soil strata is unstable. Some had already been marked off as areas that should not be developed for human settlements. So that challenge goes beyond just stormwater; it goes into geotechnical engineering as well. So you have that problem. But then on the stormwater front, it is the observation that in the recent years, even in other countries, the processes that we use, that we follow to design stormwater, which is called the rational method. You look at the catchment and you say water is going to fall in this basin, and this is how much it will be based on previous records of rains. And then you use that input into a formula. It will give you the size of the pipes that you need to use. And the planning was that at least for 20 years or sometimes 50 years, you don't expect that there will be challenges. Your design will be able to hold. But that 50 years seems to be happening every 5 years or so. So there has been a change in the weather patterns for whatever reason, should it be global warming or whatever it is. So engineers need to now go back and say, what revisions do we need to do to improve the rational method? Because the assumptions that it was created under are no longer holding right now. So that is on the stormwater front. So we need the engineering council to come and say, this is the code of practice. These are the charts we use. Once we find that the quantity in the catchment area is this much, we must then go to a chart. It will tell you need a 250 millimeter diameter pipe. But now that pipe is no longer holding right now.
So we may be needing to overhaul completely and change the way that we approach these things. Much more work for people such as yourself, because the assumptions on which you've been working have completely changed.
Yes, so there has to be a proper research done to say, are we going to set aside the rational method that we've been using completely, or can we augment it with other things, and what should those changes mean? Because the hydrological assumptions that have been there have really changed completely. So Gundo, you can't blame the engineer.
I'm sorry, I'm completely out of time, but I do want to throw in this last question. And the only reason I do that, even though I'm out of time, is that I would like as much of a record to be out there as possible around certain areas that are obviously of concern, but in my own view, no one is doing anything in between instances of, tragedy or whatever happening. So there's a situation with Centurion, for example, the CBD in Centurion. It floods from time to time. And I don't know to what extent you've been monitoring and watching what happens there, because a few years ago, I was told that it's built on a floodplain, and basically it should not be where it is, the CBD. Be that as it may, just your sense of towns and cities, how many towns and cities are built where they should not be, And if there's anything that can be done, some time ago we had the situation in Ladysmith, for example, the flooding that was happening there, even though there was a dam that was meant to sort of divert some of the water during heavy rainfalls, but we saw the flooding that continues to happen and how waterlogged the inner city becomes. Your sense about towns and townships, large, high-density locations that are located in areas that are just a disaster waiting to happen?
Yes, yeah, it's an important and quite an unsettling situation. Most of the towns, it was known that they would be prone to flooding, but because the number of residents that were expected was fewer, it means you had less roof space or canopy to hold water properly, less paving on the ground. So we've almost paved everything. The number of households have increased. So it means there's more runoff, and the pipes were not designed for that. So there's a need to upgrade those. Or for town planners to say, please don't add any more people here. Let's take them to this, let's rather divert them to this place. Let us start building new CBDs and new residential areas. That's an important thing. That is the when we talk about planning for erratic weather or for extreme weather, that is what we should be doing. Unfortunately, the more you announce that this area is prone to flooding, the prices of the houses begin to be affected, affects that market, and a lot of residents don't want that. So for that reason, politicians don't want to take that truth out lest they affect the prices and then the rates and so on. So that there is that dynamic also happening behind the scenes as well. We know that people shouldn't live here. Yeah, thanks.
All right, Gundo, I've got to thank you for your time. I do believe that I would want to have a much, much longer conversation with you to actually outline these issues, because I do believe we need to keep them sharply and firmly in focus all the time. Gundo Maswime there, who is a civil engineering lecturer at the Department of Civil Engineering at UCT, also a member of the Urban and Public Infrastructure Research Unit.